everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Jen O'Connor. I work at the Plaistow Library, and I'm very excited to have you all here tonight. We have Neil Ryan. He is the founder and executive director of Keep Massachusetts Beautiful. Keep Massachusetts Beautiful is a program or an organization that they have in Massachusetts that's dedicated to make Massachusetts cleaner, greener, and litter-free. And Neil's going to talk to us about how we can apply that here in New Hampshire. After Neil's presentation, we will have Jade Roche, who's on the Plaistow Board of Selectmen, come up and talk to us a little bit about our new trash bins and answer any questions that you may have. So again, thank you very much for coming, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for inviting me up, and welcome everybody for coming out and talking trash tonight on a Tuesday evening. So a couple of things before I get started, so just kind of set the table here. I'm going to talk first at kind of a global level of some of the issues of plastic pollution and why we should care about these things to begin with. And then I'll talk at kind of the state level of Massachusetts and how Massachusetts deals with trash and recycling. And since your trash and recycling is coming to Massachusetts, that's why it's relevant. So thank you for sending your trash and recycling to Massachusetts, creating jobs in Massachusetts. And then lastly, I'll go more at a local level, and I know we'll have a speaker after me who's going to talk about these new barrels and the new system here in Plaistow. And then I'll also talk more at what we can all do at an individual level to help with some of these questions and challenges that we're dealing with. So with that, we'll get started. If you have questions, let's hold them till the end, and then I'll try to answer them all at that time. So with that said, I'll get started. One little tidbit in my research in Googling about Plaistow and your trash and recycling system. In case you didn't know, this is the only one of two towns in the entire world named Plaistow, just so you know. You already knew that, okay. It's a little tidbit I found interesting. All right, so let's get into it. So first off, this picture here really kind of epitomizes the challenge we have worldwide with packaging, consumer packaging. So here we have a natural product that has its own packaging, aka the banana peel, but for some reason, in this case, we feel, we wrap it in cellophane and styrofoam, and then I put an organic sticker on it, ironically, and create yet even more trash. And you see examples of this obviously everywhere you go, and COVID has made it even worse. When you go to the supermarket, virtually everything is packaged in plastic, and then they put it in a plastic bag when you want to check out. And as a result of all this, we see scenes like this in certain places around the world where we're literally just drowning in plastic. The thing to keep in mind is that whatever trash we generate here on Earth generally stays here on Earth in one form or another, whether it's in a landfill or incinerated or ends up in our oceans and beaches like this. And we've got basically a garbage truck's worth of plastic entering the oceans somewhere around the world every minute of every day. And there was a study that, I don't know how they calculate this, but that they're estimating by 2050 we'll have more plastic than fish in the ocean when measured by weight or volume. But the bigger point being that there's just so much entering our oceans. And thankfully, we don't see scenes like this here in New Hampshire or Massachusetts or New England, but many parts of the world are struggling with situations like this. And some people will like to kind of point fingers and say, hey, it's not us here in the US, we're not causing this. And it's true that we have better infrastructure than a lot of developing nations in the world. Some of the top contributors to plastic in the oceans are rivers in Southeast Asia. But at the same time, we are about 4% of the world's population, and we generate 17% of the plastic waste. So we're certainly have a role in this. And a lot of what ends up in our oceans starts out as litter on our roadsides. You may see something on a plastic bottle on the side of the road, think no big deal, but when it rains and there's storms, that eventually makes its way into streams and rivers and into our oceans. And In fact, every year the the Ocean Conservancy does the International Coastal Cleanup. Worldwide, thousands of people around the world doing beach cleanups, and for 2020, the top items they found are number one, the most littered item in the world is cigarette butts. Number two was plastic beverage containers of different types. And then food wrappers, plastic bottle caps. So all that stuff we see on the roadsides, a lot of it does make its way into our oceans. And there's an obvious impact on the wildlife. So we see marine animals, whales washing up dead on beaches. When they do autopsies to see what caused their death, they find that often their stomachs are full of plastic. In this case, it was 80 plastic bags. I don't know if you can see it there. Seabirds, thousands of miles off the coast of Hawaii, Midway Island, which is 1,300 miles away from Hawaii. No human beings anywhere near, but there's pieces of plastic in the water, on the beaches. These birds mistake it for food. They eat it, makes them feel full, and then sadly they starve to death. There was a viral video a couple years back of the turtle with the straw up its nostril. So there's examples of this everywhere we look. And then the other thing, if you're not so concerned about the impact on wildlife, you might be concerned about the impact on humans, which is all interconnected. I assume, how many of you have heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? You all familiar with that term? That's essentially a highly concentrated area of the ocean, a highly concentrated trashy area. It's bigger than Texas, or it's just these huge swaths of the ocean. And every ocean actually has its own garbage patch. It's not just the Pacific Ocean. And you might envision it as, the way it's named is it's kind of like a floating island. You could like scamper across it quickly if you tried, but it's really more like a minestrone soup of microplastics. So when a plastic bottle enters the ocean, it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. And eventually the fish are eating these small pieces like you see that came out of this fish's belly. So as we here in New England like to eat our fish, there's a good chance we're ingesting some plastic along with that fish. So it's entering the food chain. And just another reminder of just overall point, we'd like to say here in the U.S., hey, just throw that away, right? Well, there is no place called away. It's going to go somewhere. And sadly, in many parts of the world, it goes into the oceans, and people are living in conditions like this. Now, when we look to the future, when it comes specifically to plastic pollution, to use an old Wall Street phrase, the trend is not our friend in this case. And this shows you where global plastic production is forecast to go. This is from 2015, but it's still relevant. So you can see the yellow portion of this chart is just more and more plastic coming our way. And that was pre-COVID, so it's probably even worse now. And when you look back to 1950, that's when mass production of plastic began. And it slowly started ramping up, and now it's just skyrocketing. So sadly, the future does not look good unless we come up with some better ways to deal with this stuff. Right now, about 9% of the plastic worldwide gets recycled, only 9%. And the rest is ending up in landfills. It's incinerated, which is putting toxic fumes in the air, or ends up as litter in our oceans. So it's a big challenge. And so you may wonder, well, when I said, when you say, well, throw something away, well, where does it actually go? So here in Plaistow, it's going to Massachusetts, and then within Massachusetts, generally at the state level, about 60% of the trash in Massachusetts is incinerated in waste-to-energy plants, which these really came about kind of early 1980s, and when they first were proposed, it seemed like the silver bullet solution to the trash problem is like, hey, we burn the trash, we generate electricity, everybody wins. But unfortunately, with trash, there's always some trade-offs. There's no real solution that's like, that's perfect. So in the case of waste-to-energy plants, you've got the issue of the emissions coming out of that smokestack, right? So while these are heavily regulated and filtered, it's basically impossible to capture all the nasty stuff that's being burned in those plants. So when they do tests of the groundwater or the soil around these plants, they find higher levels of mercury, which is a carcinogen, and other toxic substances. And then the other thing to keep in mind is after you burn all that trash, it's not like it just disappeared. Now you've got this toxic ash, and that's got to go somewhere, and it goes to a landfill. So for these reasons and others, in the state of Massachusetts, there's a moratorium on the construction of any new plants. Other parts, like in Europe, they're building more of these plants, more kind of state-of-the-art. They call it gasification. They burn it at even higher temperatures. But even in Europe now, they're kind of starting to tap the brakes a little bit on this, because it's also contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions as well. So again, it's a difficult challenge. Even if we wanted to build more of these in New England, I'm guessing if they came to Plaistow and said we're going to build a waste-to-energy plant here, people would be, well, not here. Build it over there. So, and in the case of Massachusetts, they did build it over there in Haverhill. So that is actually where the trash that's being collected here in Plaistow is going to the waste-to-energy plant in Haverhill. So nearby, but still in Massachusetts. So the other way, I mentioned 60% is going to these waste-to-energy plants. 20% of the trash in Mass goes to the landfills in-state, and 20% goes to the landfills out-of-state, several of which are here in New Hampshire. So we're sending some back to you as well, so you're welcome. And then some of it is going as far away as on trains and trucks to Ohio and South Carolina. So when you think about it, that's a very expensive way to deal with trash. And I know they're going to be speaking about the new program here in town, and that's the other part of this whole issue. Whether you're concerned about the environment or not, is the big financial impact involved in all this. And we, the taxpayers, pay for this. Or you, the taxpayers, and me. Now, going back to landfills, this is basically how, going back to the days of the cavemen, we dig a hole in the ground and bury our trash, and then cover it with dirt, and then put another layer of trash and more dirt, and so on and so forth. So what starts as a hole in the ground turns into a mountain of trash. And eventually, this just shows you where the plants are in Massachusetts, the incinerators and the landfills and the ash landfills. And they tend to be located, or in this case, in Massachusetts case at least, they are all located in or adjacent to what are known as environmental justice communities. So they don't tend to build these in the wealthier Tony suburbs of Boston. As you can see, there are none in the Boston area. All right, so taking a step back and just thinking about all this trash and how we're dealing with it, well, what's actually in the trash? And when Mass DEP studied what's going to the incinerators, this is from 2015, I believe, the thing that jumps out is that 26% is organic waste or food waste. And that's also, when you have these contracts with the trash haulers, a lot of times you're paying by weight. So that's also like the heaviest stuff that's in the waste stream. So while I'm not going to get into detail on this topic of composting, I just want to make the point that it's something that a lot of towns, cities, and states are really starting to focus on, is how do we get this stuff out of the waste stream. So in Massachusetts, any organization or business that generates 1,000 pounds or more of food waste a week must compost, the commercial composting facilities. And I believe with the new master plan, that's being dropped to 500 pounds. So a lot more places are going to have to start composting. And then us as just individuals in our households, there's a big push to encourage people to do that. We have a curbside system in my town where I live, and and I subscribe to that. So trying to do my part. But so the bigger point being here that food waste is just a really big target and an area for improvement. All right, so moving on here, we've talked just briefly, about landfilling, waste to energy, and composting, kind of the least preferred ways of dealing with trash. And let's talk a little bit more about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, which you've probably all heard that at some point in your lives by now. And we'll start with that 3rd R of recycling. So first of all, just to define the term, it means to turn waste into reusable material. So you may think of it as, hey, I put something in a bin, I recycled, but what's going on beyond that, and that is creating materials that can be reused. So PET plastic water bottles are used for things like fleece jackets, a lot of fabric, believe it or not, you're wearing plastic. Obviously, it can be turned back into plastic bottles. Aluminum cans are one of the most highly recycled and easily recycled materials. And even things like plastic film, plastic bags. A lot of supermarkets, I know in Massachusetts, I'm not sure about New Hampshire, but there's a bin right out front, and that material is used by Trex Decking and others to build prefabricated decking. So that is a valuable material. And in a perfect world, this is how the recycling system should work. So, you, just an example of you, the consumer, you've got a plastic water bottle. Not that I could really promote buying plastic water bottles. I suggest you just get a reusable. Save yourself some money and save the world some plastic. But if you do have one, you put it in your recycling bin. It's then collected and sorted, taken to a material recycling facility, otherwise known as a MRF. So in the case of your new contract with JRM, it's going to their plant in Peabody, Mass, where it's then separated. So they take all the different materials and break them out. So in the case of PET plastic, they would create a giant bale or just like a giant cube of plastic, and then sell that to someone. So that's the key point, is in recycling. No one's just doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. There's a buyer and there's a market, and people are making money. So there's an economic incentive. So the buyer then takes it, shreds it, washes it, melts it back down, and processes it into new materials. So that's where you get that, you see like that circular economy kind of comes from that kind of diagram. So that's how it should work in a perfect world, but we all know this is an imperfect world, and we have a lot of issues with recycling. One of which is that some people either just never really learned, or maybe they've heard, but they just don't really kind of buy into it. They don't think it's important. Why should I bother? It's all going to the landfill anyway, blah, 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 blah. Now, there's been stories in the media to that effect, and I'm not saying that there aren't problems in the recycling system, but for the most case, especially here in New England, it is actually being recycled. So this, what we have here is, I call it kind of recycling resistance. So that's one challenge, is we just need to convince people to recycle in the first place. And with these new bins, you're obviously making it easier for people here in Plaistow. The other challenge is to get people to recycle correctly, and frankly that's even a bigger challenge, because it's very complicated. The system that we have here is, what you have here in Plaistow, is a single stream system. So you may recall when recycling first rolled out, I'm assuming here you also had separate bins for smaller bins. You had to do the sorting of paper versus plastic, glass, aluminum, and so forth. And then the recycling industry basically said things were going well, and they were making a lot of money off these materials, so they wanted to increase the volume. So they said, hey, consumers will make it easy for you and will do single stream recycling. So we'll give you one large bin, you dump everything in there, and we'll do the sorting on the back end, right? So that was a good idea, but it's led to some unintended consequences, which is a very big increase in contamination. So contamination happens when non-recyclables are mixed with the recyclables. So if you put in food waste with your paper, that's going to contaminate the paper. And even things that are recyclable, if they're mixed like glass and paper, that's going to contaminate the paper as well. So, so contamination is a big issue, and it got, up until a few years ago, much of the recycling in the US was being shipped to China, where it was allegedly being processed, but not really. But some of it was. And China essentially said about 3 years ago, we no longer want to be the world's dumping ground for all this waste. So they would send their cargo ships over with consumer goods, and rather than sending them back empty, they'd take all the recycling and send it back to China. Now that ended about 3 years ago when they came out with a new policy that said they wouldn't accept anything with a contamination rate higher than 0.5%. So it has to be 99.5% clean. And the contamination rates in most towns and cities in New England is anywhere from 10 to 30% or higher. So it's much, there's no way we're going to meet that goal. So that really threw the whole industry into a tizzy there for a while. But now it's being sorted out, and we're seeing investment here in the U.S. infrastructure. So, and ironically, some of it is from the Chinese buying like old paper mills up in Maine, and now they're processing the materials here in the U.S. And other infrastructure investments are happening. So in the long run, it might have been a better thing that China finally said we don't want to be the world's dumping ground anymore. All right, so going back to this issue of contamination, in Massachusetts, the Department of Environmental Protection rolled out Recycle Smart 2 years ago. So it's a website that you see highlighted there to educate the average consumer about what's recyclable and what's not, because it is confusing, and you would often get different answers in different parts of the state, and maybe that happens here as well. So they got all the recyclers in a room together and said, all right, we need to come up with consistent policies and answers. So if you go to that website, you can search for items, and it will tell you whether it's recyclable or not. In some cases, if it's not in the database, you can suggest it, they'll research it and add it. Last I heard, there were more than 400 separate items listed in there. And they're trying to get away from what's known as wish cycling, where people have something, I got an old cell phone, it's got some plastic in it, I'll just toss it in there and hope for the best. And in the case of in that case, you're creating contamination. And so by having this one source of information that is hopefully educating people about what goes in and what does not. So our mantra is, when in doubt, find out or throw it out. You're actually better off putting something that's recyclable in the trash than putting something that's not recyclable into the recycling in the long run. So to that end, on the Recycle Smart, this is actually in the packet that's on the back page right there, that slide. So this slide was put together by Mass DEP, and I'll go through it in a minute, but I'll ask you guys, what do you think is the #1 biggest problem in the single stream system when it comes to contamination? Like, what product is causing the most problems? Bags, right. You're on the recycling committee, though. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So any plastic bags, any plastic film, anything that's stretchy, when you put that into your recycling, your single stream bin, it's not going to get recycled, and it's causing huge amounts of contamination. And why is that a problem? Well, I'll show you. That's why it's a problem. So when that gets to the plant that sorts all these materials, it literally just gets stuck in the gears, and they've got to shut the plant down, and someone's got to climb in there and untangle that mess, which does not look like a fun job. And time is money. So they got to shut down the plant. They might need to run things. If there's contamination levels too high, they might run things through the whole system twice to try to get the contamination level down. It's a combination of machines and humans who are, it's like the old Lucy show when she's working on the candy on the conveyor belt. They're trying to pull out all the things that shouldn't be there. So if we all can do our part on the front end, it'll make it much easier on the back end. So if there's one recycling lesson we want people to get out of this tonight, it's do not bag your recyclables and do not put plastic bags in your bin. Like I said earlier, they can be recycled at supermarkets, so just keep them in your garage, in your basement, and then when you get a big bag full, you can bring them back to the store. And it's not just keep in mind, it's not just shopping bags, it's the bag your bread comes in. It's the cereal bag liners. I just recently learned. I thought they wouldn't be, but those are actually collected. So if you start collecting this stuff, bin under your sink or whatever, you'll be amazed at how many bags you actually go through that you didn't really realize. So keeping this stuff out of the waste stream and out of the recycling stream is a big plus. Going back to the postcard that Mass DEP puts together, just go through this. This will be, I guess, all the residents are getting this with their barrels, I hope, right? So that top row is what you should recycle. So this shouldn't be news to most people, but we'll review it anyway. So, metal cans and aluminum food and beverage cans. When it comes to plastic, there's the number system, and people that's all very confusing. Oh, it's number 3, number 7, who knows, The message, at least for Mass DEP, and since this is going to Mass, it applies, is just look at it. If it's a bottle, jar, jug, or tub, and it's made out of plastic, put it in your recycling bin. If it's somehow a type of plastic that isn't recyclable, that'll be the job of the recycling company to pull it out. The other thing to remember is put the cap on. So the cap can be recycled if it's attached. If it's detached, it's too small, it kind of falls through the machinery that sorts all this stuff. So any small plastic containers in general are not recyclable in your single stream system. So whether it's the dreaded empty nip bottle, as we call them in Massachusetts, which are all along our roadsides, I don't know how bad it is here in New Hampshire, too small. Prescription pill bottles, too small. So size matters, as they say. In this case, too small should go in your trash. And on that subject of prescription, you don't want to put, if you have pills that you no longer need, don't put those in your trash and don't put them down your plumbing. Bring them to a collection center. A lot of police stations have a bin, or your Board of Health may have something. Did you have a question?
CVS collect just the empty bottles.
CVS, yep. Drugstores. All right. So, and then going off to the right there, glass. That isn't part of your system here, correct? Yes. Okay. And then paper and cardboard. I think most people know that's recyclable, but two notable exceptions are coated cartons. So like a milk carton that's got that waxy feel on it does not go, that goes in the trash. There are certain plants that do recycle that out in Springfield, Mass, the western part of Massachusetts. They do collect that, but not in the eastern part and not in Peabody where your stuff's going. And then shredded paper is too small again. And you may think you're doing a good thing by putting it in your recycling, but it actually causes problems and contamination. So don't put that in your recycling. One other thing on the plastic I didn't mention, which is a little known fact, is black plastic. So like what you get with a takeout container often, the bottom half is plastic and the top might be clear. That cannot be recycled in these plants because when you have black plastic on black conveyor belts, the machines that read the codes and so forth can't pick up the codes. So that's all going in the trash. So save them some work and just put it in your trash. Sadly, I mean, it seems like a pretty simple solution that the industry could come up is like just pick a different color. So talk to your local businesses too. If you get takeout, and you can just tell them politely, hey, did you know this is all going in the trash? And if you just picked a different, either non-plastic material, or if you really want plastic, clear plastic or something that could be recycled, that would prevent a lot of plastic waste from going into the landfills and incinerators. All right, now the bottom row is the problems, the things you don't want to put in your recycling bin. So we covered the bags already. One other point on bags is this debate which one's better or worse for the environment, and there are downsides to both. So the real answer for all of us is just reusable bags. Tricky part is bringing them into the store with you, remembering to do that. But that's really some kind of a low-hanging fruit that everybody, thing that everybody can do to help reduce waste. And when COVID hit, there was a big kind of backlash. The plastic bag industry kind of jumped on this to say, these reusable bags are contaminating, making people sick or whatever. That was really not based on any science. That was just kind of a knee-jerk reaction. I know in Massachusetts, a lot of towns have bag ordinances, and they had to temporarily suspend them. They're now back in effect. But the point of COVID or not, if you have reusable bags, you should just wash them periodically, and that should solve any problems. All right, other contamination problems are things known as tanglers, hoses, holiday lights, string lights. Don't put those in your bin. Those will gum up the gears just like the plastic bags I showed you. You want to get the food and liquids out of your recycling. You don't need to run things, through the dishwasher, but give them a quick rinse, get the visible food residue off, and good to go. And then another big part of the waste stream, about 6% in Massachusetts, not sure what the number here is in New Hampshire, but is textiles. So anything made out of fabric, whether it's old clothes, sheets, towels, and so forth. You don't want to put that in your recycling bin, number one, because it's not going to get recycled. And you don't want to put it in your trash, so you want to donate it. There's donation bins, depending on where you live. There may be ones at the school, there might be ones at the local transfer station, or convenience stores sometimes have them. Some towns have curbside pickup of textiles. You might want to look into that for Plaistow. In the town I live in Massachusetts, a company called Simple Recycling does it at no cost to the town. We have weekly curbside textile pickup, and they actually pay us a little bit based on the value of what they collect. So that is a great program. All right, so moving on is, I mentioned Recycle Smart MA, so you just want to hit that and bookmark that site. There's an example here. You typed in, can I recycle styrofoam egg cartons? And the answer is no. And just as a general point, styrofoam is not recyclable. Technically, it can be recycled, but there's no real viable market for it in the single stream system. So so for many years, certain coffee chains, had the styrofoam cups, and they have the recycling emblem on the bottom. And that's kind of a problem with recycling in general, is companies just slap that on there, even if whether their product is recyclable or not. It's kind of like greenwashing, you could call it. And it just creates confusion. So if you have a product that has that symbol, you'd say, I should put this in my bin. But in the case of styrofoam, the answer is no. All right, now also, this is another Massachusetts website, but you're right on the border here, so it should still work here. In Plaistow is beyond the bin. So if you have larger items, you're not your everyday recyclables, but furniture, electronics, sporting goods, and so forth, you can put the item in, and it'll tell you places nearby that will collect that for free. So again, there's a financial component to this because sometimes you've got to pay to get rid of bulky items, old appliances, old furniture. This might save you some money. So I encourage you to check out that site. And just in general, when you have bulky items, don't default to throwing away. There's the old phrase, one person's trash is another person's treasure. So, put it on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. You might be able to sell it or give it away. It's amazing how often, I know in my neighborhood, people will put something on Facebook, curb alert, and it's gone in 10 minutes. So keep that in mind rather than sending something to the landfill. Just a word on household hazardous waste. I know you have, I think there was a collection recently on this, but the main point being you don't want to put these toxic chemicals into the trash and obviously not into the recycling as well. So check your town's website for when those collection days are happening, which are typically annually, some places a little more frequently, but don't want to put that. We want to keep this stuff out of the environment. All right, so now moving on, just since it is that most wonderful time of the year, where trash and recycling, we generate even more, even though the average American generates around 6 pounds of trash a day. So during the holidays, it probably goes up even further. So just things to keep in mind for the holidays to try to reduce that is, when buying gifts, think about experiences. Most of us already have too much stuff already. There's commercials on TV for just point and it disappears, just the wrong mentality. But, most of us have too much stuff already. When you're wrapping, try to, you can look for paper that's made with recycled content, reused bags and bows and all that tissue stuff from last year. One thing I should mention, is tissue paper is not recyclable. Neither is napkins or paper towels. That's the fibers are too short in those items to be recycled. So that always goes in the trash. Leave your holiday lights that no longer work out of the recycling bin. I know that some home improvement stores like Lowe's and Home Depot do take those back, so you can check locally to see if that's the case. And then if you're getting new electronics, a big time of year for that, recycle your old electronics responsibly. Don't throw those in the trash. And then obviously the cardboard boxes can be reused and recycled. All right, so just last point on Recycle Smart. There's their website and their social media channels. If you do follow them, they post a lot of great educational stuff. So the more you see, the smarter you'll be, and you can impress your friends at your holiday gatherings with your recycling knowledge, right? You'll be the hit of the party. So we talked about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. And I meant to make the point earlier, but that when we think about all these challenges, recycling, I don't profess that recycling is this we're going to recycle our way out of that graph you saw with the plastic production, because a lot of stuff is not. A lot of times it's not even recycling. It's downcycling. It's not. So the larger point being, we need to focus more on reduce and reuse. This is an example here of, I guess you could call it upcycling, where you have an old item and it can be repurposed for something in a creative way. And then kind of a bonus R I like to throw in, this is getting down to that level of individual actions, is just, refuse. So just let businesses know, whether it's local places or national chains, that you really want them to give you better options. So whether if you're ordering takeout, you know you're going to be eating it at home, you can just tell them when you're ordering or online, hey, I don't need the plastic utensils, because what do? You get home, you throw that. By the way, plastic utensils, not recyclable in your single stream bin. So what do? You throw that away, creating more waste. The black takeout containers, you can let them know. When you order a drink, you can say, I skipped the straw, I don't need it, So little things like that. I saw a good image on Facebook yesterday, actually, from the Story of Stuff project, and it was like a picture of some a cartoon, but an image of someone with a coffee cup, and it said something like, what's one coffee cup? What's the difference? What's one disposable coffee cup? What's the big deal? What's the difference? And then on the right hand of the image, it said, said 7 billion people, and in a pile of disposable coffee cups. So it's really comes down to individual actions to make a difference on these things. So again, try to refuse that single-use plastic. Keep a to-go bag in my car with a mug and a water container, and even utensils in a little pack and a metal straw. So little things like that will make a difference if 7 billion people were to do it. This concept, I just want to touch on this briefly of zero waste. That's kind of the way some states are moving, is really, that concept of a circular economy, and how do we get to zero waste. Massachusetts has a master plan that's very ambitious, and whether they'll be able to pull it off, remains to be seen. But there's a group in the State House called the Zero Waste Caucus, with about 50 legislators that are really focusing on these issues, trying to pass bills, one of which is called Extended Producer Responsibility. You may have heard of this concept. Maine just was the first in the nation, passed the bill this past summer. And it basically forces, in this case, they're targeting consumer packaging. So many of the items we buy have excess packaging or are made without recycling in mind. They just make things, and then they pass the costs on to us, the taxpayers. This new program you've got here in Plaistow, I believe the contract was $85 a ton that you're paying to have your trash removed, and then you're paying $25 a ton for your recycling. So even for those who are not concerned about the environmental aspects of all this, you're saving the town money by recycling and recycling correctly. But this extended producer responsibility kind of takes that a step further and really has incentives to design packaging in an eco-friendly way, as well as penalties for failing to do so. So there's some movement on that in Massachusetts, and we'll see if anything gets passed. But maybe that's something we'll cross the border here into New Hampshire or between Maine and Massachusetts. All right, so my last topic, just quickly, I'm going to talk on this because we are talking trash. So this is a different type of trash, which is litter. And sadly, when humans visit any place, anywhere there's a lot of people, there's typically a lot of trash and also a lot of litter. New Hampshire, I have to say, maybe it's population density or whatever, but whenever I'm driving along the New Hampshire highways, I'm always, pleasantly surprised at how less litter there is compared to Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a mess. So we at the organization that I founded and run here, Keep Massachusetts Beautiful, we have a program called the Great Massachusetts Cleanup. So we help communities all across the state organize town-wide cleanups every spring and every fall. But here in New Hampshire, I know there is an organization called NewHampshireTheBeautiful.org, if you haven't checked them out. They are actually funded by the beverage distributors of New Hampshire, and the New Hampshire Beverage Association, the Beverage Distributors, and the New Hampshire Grocers Association. So they do provide grants for recycling, signs, anti-litter programs, and I believe and supplies for cleanups. So you can check out their website that you see highlighted there, and keep your roadsides here in Plaistow litter free. And then we also have a program called the Mass Litter Cleanup Crew. We don't have a New Hampshire version of this, but we have had a few people actually from New Hampshire sign up for this. And it's basically, this came about as a result of COVID, when spring of 2020, all these cleanups we had planned for that spring, all got canceled. But yet so many people were out walking around, just trying to get fresh air, maintain their mental health. And we're like, geez, if we just gave them the supplies, they could clean up as they're walking through their neighborhoods and their streets. So anyone could sign up on this site. You basically take the pledge to keep your street, your neighborhood litter free. We send you a litter grabber tool, a pair of gloves, a reusable bag, and a nifty little T-shirt you can wear. So right now we've got about 950 people who have signed up for this, and we hope to get it to tens of thousands across the state. So we will ship to New Hampshire if anyone's interested. There is a minimum donation of $10, which frankly doesn't even cover the shipping, but we want to help encourage people to take individual actions and just do their own part. And again, just kind of make it part of your routine. You're walking your dog, you're taking your exercise, keep your own neighborhood clean. All right, finally, just a few points on Keep Massachusetts Beautiful. So we are a nonprofit. Our vision is, kind of what you see here. You've got clean air, clean water, litter-free beach. Our mission is, it's our mission statement, and the two key words are taking action. So it's really about getting people involved in their own communities. Kind of boils down to community pride. It's like, some of these issues we're talking about, towns like Plaistow don't have, DPW staff sitting around with nothing to do and saying, and have all this time to pick up litter. So number one, we don't want to educate people not to litter in the first place, but number two is to get people to take action and clean up their own communities. And we've got local chapters across the state. We've got 35 now, so that's about 10% of the towns and cities in Massachusetts, but it's growing. The closest to here, I guess, would be Georgetown, but we're talking with others in the area. Finally, you can follow us on Facebook and other social media channels, and I have a sign-up sheet over here for our newsletter. We put in a lot of educational information about recycling. We have a recycling tip of the month. That type of information, just trying to educate the public about these issues. All right, last slide is I said earlier we would come down to the individual level, so this is it. So these are things we can all do to help with these challenges of trash and recycling. So number one, reduce the amount of trash you create each day. I talked about that to-go bag idea. Just think before you immediately buy something that's going to create more trash. Reuse whatever you can, or donate it to someone else who can use it, rather than just putting it on the curb for trash collection. Recycle as much as you can, but focusing on doing it correctly. So hopefully you learned a couple things today about doing it correctly. Refuse the single-use plastic. Let local and national businesses know you prefer better options than what they're giving you. And then teach your family and friends, especially when it comes to recycling. So if you see your kids missed recycling opportunities or putting the wrong things in there, you can remind them in a friendly way of what goes in and what doesn't. And then finally, take action, participate in your local community here, whether it's a local litter cleanup or a recycling drive or whatever it might be. All right. And I'll send this link out to you, Jennifer, tomorrow. We have a survey if anyone wants to give any feedback. We're always kind of tweaking this presentation as we go along and trying to make it better all the time. All right, so thank you for listening for a long time, and I appreciate it. So, excuse me, I'll answer any questions.
I have just a quick question. For cans, okay if they have the plastic lining?
If cans have the plastic lining, what type of can are you?
Well, like cat food cans, there's like a,
Which one?
or cat food cans, or certain sauce cans, there's like a, it's not just metal.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Because in the picture, it looked like there was cat food.
Yeah. To be sure, go to recyclesmart.org and put it in and see. I would think it's okay, but I'm not 100% sure. Any other questions? Yes.
Your hazardous waste page, it had batteries on it. Does the hazardous waste collection include batteries?
Yeah, that's a good question. The question was, are batteries considered hazardous waste? Some are and some aren't. So your everyday alkaline, AAA, AA, can go in the trash. They used to have, I think,
Staples collects.
mercury at some point. You don't need to do. They can just go in the trash. But other types like rechargeable batteries, you can bring back to. I know Home Depot collects them. Those should not go in the recycling bin or in the trash. Button batteries like hearing aid batteries, things like that. There are, I believe, some drugstores take them back. I know certain in Massachusetts, like the Board of Health has a little collection bin where you can take it. There's this website on our links off our website called Call to Recycle, I believe, CAL. There's a comprehensive website that lists everything you need to know about battery recycling. So you can even put that on your town website, and so people will know exactly what types of batteries go in the trash and what don't.
What was
Yep.
it called?
Call to Recycle, I think it's CALL and then the number 2, Recycle.
Our committee in the town, we're trying to figure out what to do about all the 3,000 plus old bins that we're gonna have now that we're distributing these. And I looked into it as a project, maybe have the scouts do it. We couldn't really, we determined, we got advised by the company that makes these carts that the materials that like your average Home Depot carts are made out of, by and large, they're just not recyclable. So there's no good recycling solution for that town full of carts that we're going to have. I'm wondering if you've heard of any other solutions that other mass towns have come up with.
I have not, so no good deed goes unpunished, right? So you're trying to do the right thing here, and now you're going to have thousands of plastic containers to dispose of. I don't know, but I'll do a little research. If I find out, I'll let you know. I might have a similar situation in my town that we're dealing with. Maybe there's, you think that there might be another town or city that would take them, that needs them, especially they're still in good working order, right? Yeah. All right, any other questions? Yeah.
I get a lot of emails and there's like advertisements everywhere now about plastic-free products. It seems to be like really fashionable now to buy products without packaging and things like that. So I wonder, is that actually useful or is that just a marketing gimmick? Do you know?
I think it's useful. I mean, there's like bulk grocery stores are starting to become a little bit more popular, where you can bring in your own containers and buy things not pre-packaged in plastic. So I don't know if you have a specific example, but I mean, overall,
Like deodorant sticks that are like in cardboard instead of in a plastic sheath.
yeah.
Laundry soap that's like.
Laundry soap,
Laundry
yeah.
Oh yeah, I use a product called Drops, which is these little pods, but they're not plastic pods, and it comes in a cardboard box that they ship to you, and so you don't have a big plastic jug. So yeah, I think those are good things. Those are a step in the right direction. I mean, some of them might be, you have to do the research and make sure it's actually not creating more problems. But generally speaking, yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah.
What about envelopes that have plastic windows?
The answer is, I've been told, is yes, you can recycle those. Doesn't quite jibe with the message of don't mix materials, but maybe it's so inconsequential that it's not a big deal. Envelopes that have bubble wrap on the inside, however, are not recyclable. The ones you get from Amazon now that have It's all plastic. It's got bubble and they're white,
Oh, the white
blue.
ones, yeah.
Those can go in those bins at the supermarket, but not in your recycling bin. Yeah.
You cut the tags off, like the Amazon labels, do you have to cut the label off?
You don't. Yes, good question. You don't have. The question was, do you have to take the label off of the envelopes? And the answer is no. That's what I've been told. Yes.
How clean do the peanut butter jars need to be?
The question was, how clean do the peanut butter jars need to be? No one knows the answer to that question. Yeah, that's one I'm personally skeptical of because I have a daughter with a peanut allergy, and I'm like, and so that one, I'll either soak it and really try to clean it, or I just don't recycle it. But
Fair enough.
the other one that comes up often is pizza boxes. There was a lot of discussion. Oh, yes or no. For years they were saying no because they said they're too greasy.
Right.
But now, at least in Massachusetts, and hence yours, they're saying yes. They came around. They said, you know what? It's really not a problem. You want to remove, if there's food and cheese and the liner, you remove that. If the box looks really, really bad shape, you could rip it in half and just recycle the top half. So use your best judgment there. But generally speaking, the answer on pizza boxes is yes. Yeah.
One thing I hadn't heard was that small items aren't recyclable. You had mentioned prescription bottles or medicine bottles or, the little dressings you get from takeout. So
Yeah.
is there a certain size that you're really not supposed to recycle? Because I tend to recycle very little.
Right. The question was, I mentioned that small items are not recyclable in the single stream, and what's the cutoff size-wise. And I don't have an exact answer, but I would say anything prescription bottle or smaller, generally no. Even though, the materials themselves, if they were collected separately and delivered to a plant, they could be recycled, like K-cups. They are being made out of a material that's recyclable, but they're too small for most single stream systems. So unless you deliver them separately, then it's not going to happen.
What if you put them in a bigger plastic tub?
Ooh. She says, what if you put them in a bigger plastic tub? That's a good idea. I think that might work. Yeah, so you put small items into a bigger item. I think that would work, but not the prescription. The prescription bottles, no matter what, keep those out, just because of the drug aspect. Yes.
There doesn't seem to be, from our research, consistency in terms of how the different collection companies define contamination. So we've had a fairly high contamination rate that our committee wants to work on. However, maybe if we went with a different company, they might come up with a different number because there's no standardization. Have you heard of anything, maybe in Mass, that they're doing differently as far as standardizing what defines contamination? I mean, we know what's on the no column in here, but how do companies interpret that?
Yeah. So the question was, how do different companies determine what's contamination and what's not? And how, and they might give you a score like, hey, you've got 15% contamination. How do they determine that? It's so complicated. I don't think there's a standardized version. I know that in the town where I live, when we have waste management handles our recycling, they do an annual audit. And someone from the town actually goes and watches them as they take random samples, they dump it, and they go through it, and they pull out what's contamination, and they what their calculation is. Is it based on weight or volume? I'm not sure, but so that's a tough one, I would say. And the thing is, there's new products coming out all the time. Like I talked about, extended producer responsibility. New packaging. Now we have a lot of things coming out in bags that used to be like in cardboard boxes, like candy now, and like what are those bags made out of? Is that recyclable? And nobody knows. They just kind of put it out there, and they probably put a recycling symbol on there just to make themselves look good. But if there's no viable market it's not going to get recycled. So, yeah.
I've got, the dog food containers that are plastic, and when you look at the label, it says the plastic is recyclable, but the label is not. So you have to peel that off. And I was just wondering if that's becoming more common now, or how much does that affect contamination? A lot of people rather just throw it in there.
These are dog, what were they?
They're like just dog food,
Dog food?
dog food containers. They're
Cans?
individual portions.
Okay. Plastic or metal?
They're plastic.
Okay.
And then there's like a wrap around.
Yeah.
Dog food brand and all that kind of.
Yeah. Typically the wrap is not an issue because, a lot of, think about water bottles, they've got that
They have the wrap on it.
wrap on it and they're able to separate that. So I don't think that would be a big problem. It should
So
be
it's almost
okay.
a marketing thing then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We've been told that bags and films are acceptable, I think, in the service that we have, where we collect them at the supermarket, at the Victoria Center, we've got a collection bin. So if it's plastic, generally I think anything with plastic bags, but also a plastic bag like that, I think from what I've understood, those are acceptable in that situation, but not in our bin. So you'd have to be willing to go out to Vic Erie or to Market Basket or one of those places where they collect it. As long as it's clean and dry, if it's a bag or a film, it should be able to go in there. No, like they have a separate collection bin at the Vic Erie
So I
Center.
would have to separate it, so the plastic would go here and the film would have to go to the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the film could go back to the market basket is what he was saying.
So they
To the,
need to be separated. then.
yeah. More? Okay, it sounds like we've satisfied your questions for the moment. So we have another speaker coming up. Do you want to introduce them, Jen, or is you going to do that yourself? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, let me close this.
Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight? Thank you for coming out. Thank you, Neil. That was a great presentation. A lot of great information. So hopefully we can put some of that stuff to good use and help do a better job of recycling in our town. My name is Jay DeRoche. I'm a selectman in town. I've been working with the track committee, also with my fellow selectmen on the new trash and recycling contract. I want to thank Dee Voss, who is our project coordinator. She's worked diligently on bringing this project, the contract to fruition, along with the selectmen and the track committee. So what I was going to do tonight was speak about the contract itself, what is existing from the previous contract, so what we currently have, and what is new to the contract now. So as you can see, we're going to get new barrels. This is going to be a semi-automated system. So what will happen is you'll put your barrels out to the curb, the trash truck will come up, and they have a machine on the side of the truck. There'll be a collector who will come in, roll it up against the side of the truck, and they'll dump it into the truck. Each home will receive one trash and one recycling 96-gallon barrel. And that distribution started yesterday. And it could take up to 2 weeks to get that out. I received mine today, so I thought I'd bring it and share it with everybody, and I almost fell into it. It's quite large. I was trying to get something out of the bottom, and I almost went head over tea kettle right into it. So it's quite large. So some of the things that are staying the same is we're going to continue to have our one bulk item per week. So if you have a couch or a mattress or something like that, you can still put that out and they'll still collect it. We will still have our same white goods disposal through JRM. How that works is you need to call JRM and schedule the pickup, and you pay them the fee directly. So the town isn't involved in that piece of it. So a couple years ago I had a refrigerator that broke down and I had to dispose of it, so I called JRM. They typically come out one Saturday a month, and I paid them a fee over the phone, and they picked it up and took it away and did what they do with it. Another thing that will be in place that has always been in place is with our previous trash contract, we were only allowed 2 32-gallon barrels per household. And I know people have been using larger barrels and putting out more trash. But prior to this new contract, we've always had stickers available at Town Hall when you're putting out additional trash, where you can purchase a sticker for $2 and you put it on your extra bag of trash and you put it next to your barrel. So that will still be in place if the 96-gallon barrel is not big enough. I have myself had 2 45-gallon barrels for trash, and they both fit into that. So it's really quite large. So if you're concerned that you're going to have more trash than what you're that's going to fit in there, I think you'll be surprised that these barrels will hold a lot of trash and a lot of recycling. Let's see. So that's really what's staying the same with our trash. What's going to be new about this is, and Neil mentioned it earlier, it's going to be $85 a ton for trash and $25 a ton for recycling. So the more you're recycling, the less we'll pay for the trash tonnage. Now, the caveat to that is that we need to reduce our contamination rates. Our contamination rate in town is significantly high. I think we're averaging around 35% a month. So, a lot of people put plastic bags in their recycling, and that seems to be the biggest contamination. So I'll let the presentation speak for itself. That was no plastic bags. So, and then we also, with all of our barrels, you're going to get a handout. So when you get your barrel, please look for this handout. It should be hanging on the. Hold on. Sorry. It's going to be hanging inside your barrel like this. It's got information. It has information on what to recycle, what not to recycle. It has a Q&A. It also has a letter from the selectmen talking about the new contract and how to maintain your barrel. So the barrels themselves are going to be town property. We're asking the residents to reasonably maintain the barrel itself. That means just wash it out every once in a while. If it gets damaged, so we will need you to call the town. You can call Town Hall, and you can speak with Dee Voss. She is our project coordinator. So we do have a surplus of extra barrels. We ordered about 150 more, correct, Dee? Yes. Yeah. Plus or minus, but we have a little bit of a surplus, so if barrels start to get damaged, we have the ability to replace them. And if we go through the 150 barrels, or 300 barrels, 150 for trash, 150 for recycling, we have the ability to order more if necessary. So it's not going to be a critical issue. I think we have enough surplus to handle any issues that come up. Let's see. So the barrels they're RFID chipped. So that means they've been chipped to your location, your address. So if you were to move, you would leave the barrels for the next resident that would move into your location. If you rent, you would leave the barrels as well. So they will. And if there are issues with your barrel, again, please contact Town Hall, and we can handle that. Let's see. One of the biggest things with the recycling is that cardboard takes up a lot of space, and with the last year and a half, 2 years, people are ordering online more frequently, and it's now become a mainstay. And there's a lot of cardboard that is getting into people's homes. So basically, what the town has come up with the solution is we're going to have 4 10-yard cardboard-only dumpsters located around the town. They're going to be in 4 different locations, strategically placed so that, you know, someone who lives out on 108 has one nearby, they can get to that. Someone in the center of town can get to one that's centrally located. The list hasn't been finalized yet, but once we finalize that list, we will be advertising it, putting it on social media, on our webpage, on our email blast. So, and that will give you an opportunity to go and get rid of your cardboard so you have more space in your recycling bin for other recyclable materials. But the key to all the recycling is to doing it properly. So I know that the track committee is working on solutions to present to the selectmen. You know, one of the things that I was looking at doing to reduce my waste was to look at composting. There are services in New Hampshire that you can sign up for that will come and pick it up, but right now there's nothing in Plaistow because there isn't a lot of interest. So if we can get groups of people that are interested, it would be more enticing for these composting companies to come in and say, okay, we can handle 50 people, and that will help reduce your trash output. And really, those are really the biggest changes to the new trash contract. Is, you know, the new barrels. The service really hasn't changed much. I know they're quite large, and there's been some concern about the size and how people will be able to move them around. I know they're made so that they are easily, you can move them around fairly easily, but they're you can tip them pretty easily, and you don't have to tip them that far. You just got to tip them enough where you can just push it along. So I know it's a little overwhelming to look at, to see, but they're pretty easily moved around, and they're pretty durable. If you want to come up and take a look and try it out, let me know. Come on up.